Welcome to the Tenkara Angler Level Line Podcast, a podcast that chronicles the stories of the Tenkara and fixed line fly fishing community. I'm one of your hosts, Mike Agnetta, and I'm joined today by another host, Anthony Naples. How's it going, Anthony?
It's going pretty good. Hey, Mike. Hey, folks. Hope everyone's going. Hope everything's going well for everyone. Obviously, not for me.
I can tell you, I live in Florida, for those that don't know, and it is ridiculously hot right now. I did a bunch of fishing in June, but I haven't got really out in July yet. Obviously, I don't want to go anywhere outside in Florida in July. It's been like 96 degrees and humid and ridiculous, even for, warm water fixed line pond fishing. But I really need to sneak up to the mountains at some point. It's been ungodly hot. How's it been for you?
Yeah, it's pretty brutal here too, in the high 80s and just humid as could be. Like, I was out fishing the other day in the morning. My waders are leaky. I put my socks out, my wet socks out on the fence to dry, and like at 10 in the morning and at 8 at night, they're still wet.
The humidity, right? Yeah, it's a killer.
Yeah,
I tell you what,
pretty brutal here too. So morning fishing has been about it.
Yeah, and that was a pattern. We're going to talk about that, I think, in a little bit. We're going to go over some of the events that happened over the course of the year. But before we get to that, we wanted to touch on some interesting new product launches that have kind of popped up all at once, over the span of about, 30 to 60 days, somewhat out of the blue in the case of some of them. We've highlighted them all on tenkaraangler.com, but thought it might be a good opportunity to talk about them a little bit here. I'll kick it off. The first one, which kind of has been teased for a little bit. We heard River Peak is going to be coming out with a new rod, and the one that they came out with is probably one that probably wasn't one that people were expecting. They came out with a pocket rod called the Sengaku Special. I think I'm pronouncing that right. It comes in three sizes: a 2.4, a 2.7, and a 3.0. And the thing that's really interesting about the rod, I actually have one right here. This is the 3.0. The thing that's really interesting about this rod is it's an 8.2. So it's a little stiff rod, which, you might kind of think of. I think a lot of people, like when they think of pocket rods, especially short ones, they think of like blue lining for brookies or something like that, where you might want to have a, kind of a softer rod because you're catching smaller fish. But this one's actually a little bit on the stiff side, but they do mention that it pairs well with a PVC line as opposed to a furled line. So that kind of offsets and gives the rod a little bit more life when you're casting it, and makes those casts, a little bit easier. I've only cast it in the yard. I haven't fished it quite yet, up in the, blue lining or really anywhere yet. So jury's out on it, but it's definitely an interesting rod. It's one, like I said, that I don't think most people kind of had on their radar. Obviously, a lot of people really like the Kawamis. I know you have a Kawami and you fish that.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is.
So what's that grip like on there, Mike? I haven't seen one in person.
So I was going to talk about that. So I was going to ask you, number one, do you think this is a Tenkara rod? By definition, right?
I don't think I'm going to go down that path.
Yeah. So those that can't see this, that are just listening, the Sengaku Special or Sengaku Special, it does not have a cork handle at the end. What it looks like to me, it's really tough to kind of tell. It's gritty, but it looks like it's kind of grit that was kind of glazed over like a thread wrap. So it definitely gives you, quite a bit of grip on there. It's not smooth like some of those other pocket rods. They're just smooth from tip to tail. But it definitely has a little bit of a grip to it. It is, kind of light. And like I said, it is kind of stiff. But, I know Tom Davis got one. He's going to do, all the measurements. I have one. I'm going to lend some measurements to him. So we do a proper rod report. Tom Davis style. We'll have all the RFI, CCSs, all that fun stuff. So that was rod number one. All right. Well, the next rod we're going to talk about is one that definitely created a lot of buzz out there in the Tenkara community. It's the Dragon Tail Talon Mini. A lot of these rods got out to, I guess, what you'd want to call Tenkara influencers. I know I got one. You got one, Anthony. Yeah. Matt got one, which he's already fished, out in the Driftless, I think, last weekend. Here it is for those that are watching this podcast. And it's a really interesting rod. It sold out. The first batches of it sold out like immediately. I mean, people were saying they tried to buy the first batch and it was like in and out of their carts in minutes. I think now their Dragon Tail's taking pre-sales for it in November. So definitely shows the interest in these small, kind of pocket rods. I'm curious. I don't think you had a chance to fish this rod yet, but what do you think about pocket rods in general? The first two that we talked about are, kind of those smaller rods.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're pretty cool. I've used like the Tanuki rods, and I love, like, I do a lot of hiking with my wife, when we go on vacation, in the Great Smokies, or, Smokies National Park, or out in Colorado. And I just think it's cool to be able to throw one in my backpack on non-fishing trips. That's how I use them, I think, mostly is on a non-fishing trip. I'll throw it in my bag, and if I get a chance to stop and fish, I'll use it. So I generally don't go out with them as my only rod, but I love that for hiking.
Yeah, I get that. I kind of think of it the same way. I mean, I will say I did get to fish the Talon Mini in the mountains of North Georgia, and it's a totally capable rod. I probably wouldn't use it as my primary driver or whatever myself, but like you said, like kind of grab and go, or even as a backup rod. It's so small, like you can just fit it basically anywhere, right? Like you don't have to have the big rod hanging out of your backpack or sling pack or whatever with that tip that's sticking out that undoubtedly gets caught in stuff or whatever. Like this one could just fit inside, and it makes it really easy to kind of bring around. So that rod is definitely interesting. But like I did mention, I think they're pre-sold all the way out through November right now. So if you are listening to this and are interested in this rod, I definitely try to pick one of those up now, so you're ready for, I guess in this case, the holidays. I don't know, like I said, the reaction was pretty wild to that from all that I heard and saw.
How was when you fished it, how was the balance on that, Mike? It's got a fairly short grip. How'd you find
it? Does. The balance is okay. I mean, you can tell that it's not, a very, very high end, high performance rod. It's a little heavy. But I think it's fine. Like I said, if there are a lot of other standard rods, like standard, if you want to call it. This one, I think it's like a little bit over 10 foot, but like there's a lot of other like 11-foot rods or 12-foot rods that, don't really feel all that much different. And the thing that I really like about it is the backbone that it has. Even though it's like a small rod, like it's not necessarily like a tiny fish rod. Like you could handle some nice sized fish on that rod. It's pretty, when you've got all those sections that collapse down, right? Like it makes that bottom section where they all nest pretty wide. So I guess because it's pretty wide, you get a little bit of backbone in that rod, which is not. I think the only thing that people might like is the handle. The handle's, a little bit short, but you kind of just depends on how you grip that. I'm one of those guys that grips a Tenkara rod like in the butt, so it's like perfect for me. But if you're one of those people that like to go a little bit up higher, it might be a little bit awkward because there's no contouring on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of funny you mentioned it. It's kind of like the back end of like a dual kind of contour grip when you look at it.
Yeah, exactly. And it kind of fishes that way too. It's obvious when you hold a rod like that, it's a little bit more, I guess, tip heavy because of just, it's a little bit longer and the momentum's like that. So that's kind of how that rod fishes. Next up, another product that came out in the last month or so, and this one I totally was not expecting at all, was the Tenkara USA flyweight jacket. Usually everybody's talking about rods and, maybe some sort of packs or accessories, but an actual branded rain jacket, fishing jacket, whatever you want to call it. That was kind of interesting. I know you got one of those. What did you think of yours?
I did. Yeah, I really like it. I mean, unfortunately, I guess unfortunately in more than one way, there hasn't been a lot of rain. So, out in the Driftless, I was hoping to give it a go. We didn't get any rain, and haven't really had much rain until the last couple days. And then it's been just up here where I am now, it's been like downpours when it rains. So, and the stream was crazy. So I haven't been out in that, but yeah, I'm looking forward to later, in the fall and stuff to get out. And it's nice, it packs up pretty small. You could throw it in a backpack pretty easily. So I think it'd be a pretty nice little jacket.
Yeah, I agree. The thing that I liked about it was the ventilation that it has. Yeah. I have a couple other jackets that are kind of those rain jackets that ball up really small and put pockets, but some of them don't have, pockets for your hands, to go in or put gear in or whatever. And then some of them don't have those pit zips for ventilation. Right. And I know a lot of time, like when you use a rain jacket, it might not necessarily be cold. It just, you want to keep the rain off you. So it might be, 75, 80 degrees, something like that. So if you're wearing one of those, those are really good features that jacket has. That I know I have a couple jackets from like REI and Outdoor Research and stuff like that where they don't have some of those features. So it's clearly tailored towards fishing, which is nice. You know, I haven't gotten it wet, super wet at least yet either. So I'm curious to see how it holds up in some of those, you know, drencher situations. I guess I could go outside in Florida. We get those 3 o'clock, you know, thunderstorms every day and just see how it goes. But like I said in the beginning, it's like 96 degrees. I don't want to be putting a jacket on. Cool. Another thing that's kind of cool, and we'll just kind of talk about this, is Riverworks Rod Company, which is Jeff Lamino's company out of Tennessee. They had like a little burst of new products. Everybody I think is already kind of aware of their tactical nymphing rod, the ZX4 Pro. It's probably the best nymphing rod that's out there. It was co-designed with Rob Worthing, and they put out a couple other interesting rods. They have I think it's called the Monster Rod 395, which is like a big fish rod. And the other one they put out is like a split grip steel header rod, which is really wild when you see the pictures. I don't know if I necessarily consider that I definitely don't consider it Tenkara. It's more fixed line fishing. What do you think about a split grip rod?
I don't know. I wasn't really aware of that. I wasn't paying that much attention, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know where I would use it, but like, I don't know. I would love to hear this. This is something I'd love to hear from people who have used one, like in the comments, let us know what you think. I don't fish anywhere that I would use it, but what about you, Mike? Any
I mean, I would love to just mess around with like that kind of spay cast, kind of see how that goes and roll them out. But again, I don't really live anywhere either where I would use that. I could go wade out into a pond, but there's gators where I live, so I probably wouldn't do that. But yeah, I'd love to kind of mess around with that. I'm not necessarily a big fish, long line Tenkara guy, but I think the opportunities or the evolution of rods into that arena is definitely interesting. Not for me, but
yeah. So do you know what Jeff, like what lines that's designed for? Do you have any idea? Like
I really don't. I would imagine you'd probably put a floating line on it or something like that. Yeah. I would think, or at least you need something with some sort of weight. I would guess to kind of shoot it out there. But
we'll have to ask him about that and maybe put something in the notes about it. Because I'm curious.
Yeah, I don't think he made a lot of them, but he did kind of pop that out there. I think it was on Facebook one night, and I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. You did get a rod redone by him though recently, right?
I did. Yeah, I think it's the third rod I've had redone by him. So I recently got an Oni 3 and in a barter with another angler, and it had like some of the paint had been chipped off. So I kind of talked to Jeff about, what should I do with that, and he was like, well, send it to me and I can work on it. And then he said, well, if I'm going to do that, why don't we put a new grip on it too? So we went and did that, the full Jeff Lamino treatment with the carbon fiber grip with that it's like a dense hard foam underneath. And I'll tell you actually, I guess this is the fourth rod I have like that, because I have one of his nymphing rods, I have a Tanuki rod, and another rod that's been converted. And I always tell people when I'm nymphing, or when I'm fishing, I'm mostly a visual strike detector, But I have noticed with these grips, like he talks about and Rob Worthing talks about, you definitely can feel a lot more than you can with some other grips. You really do feel, even if you're not feeling bites, you're feeling the bottom, so you can kind of map out
right.
You're ticking along the bottom and stuff. So, I mean, I just think they look cool, and they are functional too in that way, So, yeah, kudos to Jeff on those rods. I know the Tanuki rod I had done. Man, it's just no slight to Luong, but his grips are just too small for me in general. So I'm always telling him to make them bigger. So when I had Jeff do it, I got a bigger one put on it, and it just made a huge difference for me. So anyway, yeah, I mean, if you've got an Oni rod you're interested in converting, they turn out really nice, and yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and I believe that's a service that's available on the Riverworks website. You just kind of scroll into their shop and they have like an Oni convert link or something. If somebody's interested in looking at, maybe a couple more pictures of other rods or, actually doing it yourself. It's kind of a cool thing that you can do, to what is already an amazing rod, kind of even amp it up a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
Cool. And the last one I wanted to bring up, and I don't know if too many people actually know about this one. I actually don't have all the details on this one either. But when we were in the Driftless in the beginning of June, Tom Bailey from Tenkara Adventure Outfitters was kind of passing around one of his new rods, which he's going to release, I think, really soon. I talked to him on the phone 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he said he was just basically waiting for the shipment to come in. I don't remember what the name of the rod was going to be. I think there were a couple names that were kicked around online. But it's basically a zoom rod. Did you get to play around with that?
I didn't see it. No, I didn't see it.
He's kind of passing it around, to people the one day that everybody was kind of lawn casting. And, I don't remember all the specs about it, but if you are a Tenkara Adventure Outfitters fan and you like either their rods or the previous Badger rods, I guess a new one's coming out soon. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. I'm sure we'll post about it, when the time comes.
Mike, do you remember what the lengths were on the Zoom rod?
I don't. This is just me guessing. It looked like it was not quite as robust as the Bad Axe. So I would think it was probably maybe a little bit smaller than that, but I don't remember. I didn't actually cast it when it was there. I just kind of, put my hands on it real quick and, passed it along, just kind of check out the rod that he had. But kind of interesting stuff. Yeah, it's nice to see that. I think that'll be their first new rod since they changed over from the Badger rods, if I'm not mistaken.
That's exciting. That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about the Driftless a little bit, as we've been kind of running through this. Thought it might be a good idea to give, just our listeners a little bit of a recap of that. There's been a couple events so far this year. Tenkara events are always a great opportunity to, meet people. Tenkara, for all intents and purposes, for a lot of people, is one of those things where you kind of lives online and a lot of conversations happen online, but you get the opportunity in a couple scenarios to actually meet people face to face, exchange ideas, and actually fish with them. Tenkara Angler hosted an event in North Carolina. It was in Tennessee this year, right? Tennessee.
Correct.
In April. And then there was actually just recently the Oni school out in Utah that I know people went to with Masami Sakakibara. Check out Jason Klass's photo recap of that on tenkaratalk.com if you get a chance. He did a really, really good job capturing the look of that event. But, the one that we're going to talk about is the Driftless Camp Out, which is in Wisconsin. It's organized by two guys, Zone and Dave. They've been doing it for quite a few years, and it's just basically a informal gathering where people get together. We met up, and I know we've gone there quite a few years. I know you're a big fan of the Driftless. Why don't you explain what that is to people that aren't familiar?
Explain the Driftless? So the term Driftless itself it just means that the area is free of glacial drift. So in the last ice age, the glaciers, for reasons of topography and geography, I guess, went around this region. So as a result, all the spring creeks that might otherwise be buried under all this glacial drift are all there to fish. And so it's southwest Wisconsin and that area there where it also borders Minnesota and Iowa. It's the primary fishing area. Yeah. And it's mostly, at least in my experience, mostly meadow and pasture type fishing. There are a few streams that may go through wooded areas, but very pastoral farmland and farm country. And mostly small streams. So streams you can literally straddle up to, sort of medium-sized streams. But I'd say the bulk are fairly small, but just filled with trout. And, I always tell people
filled with trout.
Filled with trout, yeah.
Trout. Yes.
Right. I mean, like not to brag or anything, but if you put in a good full day of fishing when the fishing's on, 100 fish day is not a ridiculous idea. That's pretty doable for most people when the fishing's on. And the state of Wisconsin has done a great job of getting easements and access to lots of property. So as a visiting angler, if you ever thought about doing it, it's a pretty easy, self-guided, area. You can get a lot of access. It's easy to find. So do it.
A lot of access, and it because it is in the kind of pastures and meadows and things like that. It's easy to get around too when you're on the stream. Generally, a lot of for those that actually do fish Tenkara, in the mountains, high gradient mountain streams where you kind of have to like hop along boulders and things like that. You don't have to do that in the Driftless. I don't want to say it's like a casual stroll because you need to keep your profile low. There's a lot of kind of squatting and kneeling and things like that. You don't want to give yourself away to the fish. But it's relatively easy in, easy out. It's definitely a unique experience. I've never fished anything like that before I went there.
Yeah, and what's cool about it too is it's not like they're spring creeks, and so they stay cool and stuff. But they do have enough gradient that they're not these placid,
right?
Sheets of glass like you see on some of the, like out west. You'll see some of those pictures of these spring creeks that are just totally placid and impossible to fish. They're not like that. They're generally lots of bend pools and enough gradient that you sort of do have a riffle pool run structure, so it's not terribly difficult fishing.
Yeah, but it's lots of fun. And like I said, we went out there I guess it was the first week of June. And we got a cabin. We went to the camp out during, the days and nights, but we actually had a cabin. We didn't stay in a tent. Tenkara Angler had a cabin with a couple other folks. And it was kind of an interesting mix of people. I mean, you and I were there for most of it. You actually stayed a little bit longer than I did, but we had, I don't know if you want to call it like a transient community kind of coming in and out. I don't know what the best way to describe it. So why don't you tell everybody who was in our cabin besides yourself and me?
Yeah. So my good friend Larry came and interestingly, so this was his first trip to the Driftless, and he's Tenkara fished a little bit before, but I think this is kind of the first time that he committed and kind of did it for the whole time he was there. Yeah. And it's cool because Larry is I went to college with Larry, and he's the guy that when I started fly fishing, he took me out and showed me how to cast, and he's the guy that kind of taught me how to fly fish. So it was cool to be able to kind of return the favor and get him onto Tenkara a little bit. So that was cool. And like I said, it was his first trip there, and unfortunately conditions were a little tough. They didn't live up to like the everything I was telling him, but I think he had a good time. And then the other guy that came along was an interesting fella. I met actually in the spring. Luong from Tenkara Tanuki brought him along, and they stopped. We met in State College for a couple days while they were on their way to the fly fishing show in Lancaster. So I met Bob, and Bob is it's Sunfish. Let me look. I don't want to get it wrong. So he runs a company called Sunfish Woodworks. So look up sunfishwoodworks.com. He's on Instagram, and he does fish carving. So he'll be at some of these fly fishing shows. He'll maybe you'll see a 6-foot muskie or a giant 4-foot sunfish, and so that's kind of what he does. He's giant fish carving. So I met him, like I said, in the spring, and then he came out and fished. So that was cool. I'd never really spent that much time with him, but I think he really got into it. He left, as he showed me pictures. He left Michigan to come fish. I guess the hex hatch maybe was happening, and
the infamous hex hatch.
Yeah.
Right.
So they were fishing on boats going down the river at night, catching giant trout, these big browns. And he came to the Driftless, to these small streams. It's at that time, but I think he had a good time. He seemed like he was catching a lot of fish. Luong was there for a while from
Tanuki.
Yep. So I love seeing Luong. He's a great guy. I don't know if you ever met him. I mean, I think Luong's just a friendly, generous kind of personality. I really like him. Who else showed up there, Mike?
We had Mike Lutz, right?
Mike Lutz, yeah, Mike Lutz. So if anyone remembers Badger Tenkara, of course, was Matt Sment and Mike Lutz, and he's a ER doctor. So he was able to carve out a little bit of time and come out and visit. I think it's the first time I'd seen him since the last event they put on, the Midwest Tenkara Fests. So It was cool seeing Mike.
Yeah, I kind of missed out on Mike. He came in the one day and then I left the next day. So I didn't really get
Yeah.
to spend much time or fish with him. I think he was only there for a day or so, right? Anyway,
Yeah, he was
if I'm
there
not
like
mistaken.
one night. Yeah. I
Yeah.
didn't fish with him, but I got to chat with him, hang out. So that was cool.
Yeah, so we had a nice mix of folks in the cabin for the week. Not to mention, all the folks. The turnout at the campsite was really, really strong this year. I don't know what the final count was. I would guess it was probably about 40 or so people, if not more. I mean, it
looked like a lot. I don't know what the count was, but there was quite a few people for sure.
Yeah, and then just to set the stage, what that usually is they kind of there's a county park, which is kind of like the headquarters for the event, and people kind of that's. If they're camping, that's where they're staying. But, usually every night, everybody, whether they're camping or not, kind of comes back to the campground, congregates, have a meal, tell stories, just, all the good, nice, fun camaraderie that, you're able to do in real time as opposed to, delayed when you're doing it online or whatever like that. So it's really fun to just meet people that you have been talking to, online or, might have seen their YouTube videos before or, whatever it might be. That's why I really love those events.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really cool. And it's funny as you keep talking about these events, it takes me back to the beginning of Tenkara in the United States, back like 2009.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, it was all online. You meet all these people online, and so many people like you, Matt, so many people that I know. That's how we met, was through Tenkara online, and I also, it always makes me wonder about the whole Tenkara thing. Could it have happened the way it did without the internet? Could it have spread like it did? And I kind of think it would have been difficult for that to happen.
I do too. I agree with you. I think it was, that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. We could probably talk about, an hour or whatever about that, but I think you're right. I think it was one of those things where, there were a lot of social media platforms popping up at the right time. YouTube was getting popular. Facebook was getting popular.
Blogging.
Blogging. Absolutely. And, Daniel and Tenkara USA, give them credit where it's due. They kind of got on them first, created a little community, and it definitely blossomed from there. Obviously, other people hopped on and put their marks on it, whether it was, Tenkara Bum or some of the other folks after that. But it was definitely all online based, and everybody was just trying to figure stuff out. It was kind of
yeah. So Mike, why don't you? I know we this year in the Driftless was a little different than other years. So why don't you talk a little bit about what we faced this year?
It was. So normally when we go to the Driftless, we I think in the past when they've had the campouts, they've ranged from anywhere from like the middle of May to the beginning of June. This one happened to be the first basically weekend of June. And sometimes when you're there, the weather can be very, very finicky or change on a dime. Like you could be there. I remember one year we were there, it snowed. In May. You definitely typically get a lot of rain. There's usually at least a day where it's like raining all day solid, and the other days, it's raining for a couple hours or whatever, all that sort of thing. This year when we went, we were basically told from everybody like it hasn't rained here in a month, and you definitely saw that the water levels were way down. It was hot. I don't remember what the temperatures were, but I feel like it was
It got into the 90s.
Yeah, definitely mid 80s, low 90s. So especially during the middle of the day. So it was just, it was tough fishing. And what made it, I guess, what compounded it for a couple days too, was we got that Canadian wildfire haze. You remember that?
Yeah.
And it turned the skies kind of, that orangey color, and you'd go back after a day of fishing or an evening fishing and be like, man, it's my breathing right, that sort of thing. So the fishing was definitely a lot harder this year. Usually when it's cooler and there's, overcast and there's more water in the system, there's just way more places where you can fish. Fish are, kind of more spread out in different places and, a little bit more eager. But, we had to kind of fish in the mornings and the evenings just to try to compensate for just basically the temperatures and make it tolerable on ourselves. Right. I know you went out pretty, it was a vacation for me, so I slept in a little bit. I slept in till 8 some days, but you were getting up at like 6:30, something like that.
Yeah,
right?
A couple days we hit the stream. 6 or 6:30. Yeah, because like you said, by 9:30 it could be pretty brutal already. By 9:30, 10 o'clock, because you're in those. You're generally, there's no shade.
Right.
The good part about it is there's no trees to get stuck in for the most part, but then the bad
Right.
part, there's no shade. So it was tough, but it was kind of cool. It gave the whole thing a definitely a different feel. And part of it was kind of cool because like usually I go out and I fish all day, like
Right.
morning to, you know, I don't get started super early usually, but I fish all day long. And then, but this time, you know, would take that big siesta in the middle of the day. So you kind of hang out a lot more, talk a lot more. And I actually got to go, I tried out a bunch of restaurants that I never went to because, you know, usually I'm not stopping to eat in the middle of the day. So that was kind of cool. And actually like kind of one of my highlights happened during one of those siestas. So we were fishing Mormon Creek Coulee, which is right outside of La Crosse.
Okay.
And my friend Larry told me that when he was coming in from, I guess he came in through La Crosse, and he's like, yeah, I saw this Dave's guitar shop. You know, you got to go there. You got to see what it's like. And I was like, you know, we're fishing. I don't need to see the guitar store, you know? And so, but then as it developed and we needed a break anyway, so we figured, well, we'll go check it out. And if I know this isn't Tenkara related, but I know there's got to be other guitar fans out there that go to the Driftless. If you like guitars and you go to the Driftless to fish, you have to make the trip to Dave's guitar. It was, I don't think I've ever seen more guitars in one place, you know, to buy. He's got used, vintage, new, just about any brand you want to try. He's got them. And then upstairs is his private collection.
Oh, wow.
Just
okay.
Walls. I'll get some pictures we can post. Just walls of guitars. Like there's a whole wall of Les Pauls. There's a whole wall of Telecasters. And upstairs, they're all vintage, you know, instruments from the 50s and 60s.
Right.
I mean, just looking around, I mean, there had to be, I don't know, $20 million worth of guitars. It was crazy.
That's amazing.
So if you're a guitar person, you know, so next time when I go, I'm gonna save up. I'm gonna try to avoid buying any guitars between now and then. Easier said than done, but you know, and buy one when I go up there because there was just so many. It was amazing. So
Nice.
that was
That's
kind of
awesome.
a non-fishing related, but a result of the weather, really, because otherwise I'd have never gone. So
Yeah. And, I mean, look, and when we go to some of these places that aren't necessarily your home water, like exploring is part of the fun as well. Like I like to eat in all kinds of weird different places that I would, you know, normally. You actually turned me on to this one little like kind of hot dog ice cream stand. I think it was called Beanies, and that place was great.
Yeah, everything you could get everything with a hot dog. You could get an omelet with a hot dog. I think there was like an open face hot dog with like sausage gravy for breakfast or something like that.
When in Rome, I guess, right? But you know, that was definitely great, and you know, it was a awesome day on that particular, or it was awesome on that particular day, just to get out of the heat, you know, get into everything and you know, get something cool to drink. And
we went to you know. So the little town of Westby is pretty cool. And I guess it's, you know, you've got a lot of the Scandinavian heritage in that area. So we went to I think the restaurant was called Borgen's.
Yeah.
And so I was looking at the menu and there was something, it was called a lefse wrap. And so I was like, what's this lefse wrap? She said, well, it's a lefse. And then, you know, it's like a breakfast burrito. I'm like, hold it, back up a second. Like, what's a lefse?
What's a lefse?
So, yeah. So that was kind of, it was like it's like a flatbread, but I guess it has potato flour and other flour. So it kind of was like a tortilla, but not as chewy as a tortilla. It was actually really good. So that was kind of cool to see some of the original kind of flavor from the original settlers of the area.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, food aside, let's talk maybe a little bit about the fishing, right? So we talked about how difficult it was, or a little bit more difficult. I won't say it was difficult. Still caught a bunch of fish. What tactics did you use? What equipment? What tactics? What did you use to, you know, attack the Driftless, I guess?
Yeah. So this year, so rod wise, one of my favorite rods of all time is the Tanuki 375. I just think it's a great length rod. It's kind of in between a lot of rods. And it'll do anything I want it to do. I can fish. It's very versatile. If I want to fish nymphs, I can do that. And I can switch level lines, furrow lines. It'll handle all that stuff. So that's the rod I used for the first couple days, and all level line with that. And then I had the Kita 330 from Tenkara Rod Company that I hadn't had a chance to use a ton. So then the rest of the trip, I used that. And I actually used it with, and this is going to be, this is a selfish on my part, but I want to use this platform to ask anyone if anyone out there makes furled, custom furled Tenkara lines, let me know. Drop a note, because I can't find, since Streamside Leaders is no longer available. There's no one that I know of that's doing that. Where you were able to go on and make a custom line, just kind of pick everything you wanted. So if anyone knows about that, if anyone's doing that, let me know. But so the rest of the trip, I fished with that Kita with a light furled line, and I can't find another one like it. Mm-hmm. So they're like, there were ones I had Mike Moline make me from Streamside. One's fluorocarbon and one was nylon mono. So instead of like a thread furled line, and those ones made with mono, nylon, or fluorocarbon are they're much lighter. You know what I mean? They're kind of like they're not so limp. They don't soak up the water. So I really like those a lot when I'm fishing, because I can go back and forth between dry flies and Tenkara's techniques and stuff pretty easily. I just think they're great lines. So that's what I used a lot, because I switch back and forth a lot depending on what, on the same stream. If I'm in a section that I might want to, say I come across a nice pool that I might want to do a dry dropper to get the nymph to drift to, I'll switch up, and switch back and forth. But so that was the rods I was using. But then like technique wise, I did a lot of nymphing, and actually the killer bug, which in Tenkara circles is kind of a big fly that a lot of people know about. Yeah. I never had luck with them. I just never used them. But I was fishing one of these small streams. I went out one morning early. Actually, this was in the middle of the afternoon. I went out and I went to a tiny stream. I figured maybe I'd head way upstream where it was close to the springs. It'd be nice and cool. The fish were fine. You could see the fish out in the flats. The fish were not thermally stressed. The water was cold, but it was super shallow. And any of the beadhead nymphs I had were just they were just sinking too fast. So I put in these like unweighted killer bugs. Okay. And just had a great morning. Just caught a ton of fish. So it was kind of fun to have, I kind of feel like I'm late to the party, but I just never had great luck with them. So it reminded me, and I've had friends that are, like a friend of mine is a competitive angler, even if you're nymphing, make sure you have some lighter nymphs, beadheads are so popular now, but it reminded me to have some old-fashioned nymphs that aren't weighted and that you can fish those shallow riffles and stuff. Sure. Because the year before, this year not as much, but last year, I don't know if you remember, the fish were really holding the riffles, like in shallow riffles. Yeah. And if you had on a beadhead fly, it was just, it was too heavy. So I fished that killer bug a lot, and then, like you say, crawling around. I spent most of my time, crawling around hands and knees, unless you could find something to hide behind. Sure. So if you thought you were just gonna, it brought that. It was a lesson relearned. Is that if you're fishing somewhere that there's fish, and you don't seem to be catching any fish, that's kind of the first thing I go to now. Is
it's up your stealth.
It's my stealth, right? Yeah. The first change I make is okay, I'm not being careful, and I got to be stealthier. So that this year made a huge difference. And it was hard fishing with two people. I don't know if you found that to be the case. It was hard this year. In other years, it seems like you could have a group of people fish along the stream. And this year, it was really tough if you were with another person. It's just tough getting around and not spooking fish for each other. So yeah, I did find that. It was tougher to get around just in general, because we went a little bit later this year and the grass was so much higher. Yeah. Going through those fields was a little bit of navigating a bit of a jungle. Yeah. I kind of did a mix of fishing with people and going solo. I fished with Matt one day. I fished with Dave Rossett one day. I fished sort of with Mike Lutz one day. He was kind of on a different section of the stream, but we all kind of, went there at the same time. But the other times I kind of went by myself, and I kind of had the same observations as you, in terms of, needing to be stealthy. And that's actually one of the benefits I think that Tenkara does bring to the game a little bit. When you have the longer lines, and since you don't have the overhead impediments, you could fish a 13, probably fish a 14 or a 15-foot rod if you had one, but it allows you to kind of get back from the bank a little bit. You don't have to go down into the water to fish the driftless. And you can get over those plants you're talking about, those weeds. You can kind of get down and get your rod and line up and over that stuff. Yeah. And I was using wader gaiters with knee pads for the first time this trip. And my God, they saved my knees, because I was crawling all around, and it was just nice to have knee pads on, because
just I'm 46 years old. My knees are creaky. You know what I mean? Like I'm not a, a 20 something anymore. So, that made the fishing, a lot more enjoyable too. As far as what I fished, just kind of, I fished probably 3 rods. I fished the Nishin Oni Hanryu 395 probably most of the time. And when I fished those, that was usually when I decided I was going to fish nymphs or something with some weight on it. So when we fished bigger waters, I usually fished that. I will say there was one day I went out by myself to one of my kind of, I won't say it's top secret because I found it in like a guidebook, but it's one that I don't like to tell a lot of people about because it's a little bit small. But it has brown trout and brookies in it. And I fished the Dragon Tail Kaida. And that one I was using, non-bead heads. I was using unweighted flies. And that rod, I really, really like that rod. When it first came out, I was like, oh, it's just another Zoom rod. It's just smaller. But there's just something about it. It's really light in hand. The graphite like tube or, blanks or whatever, they're like thin. They're not that thick one. So it's like really light and crisp. And I really, really like that rod a lot. It was one that the more I fish with it, I've since fished with it again in North Carolina. It's really, really growing on me, but it was a workhorse that day. On that smaller creek, that's probably the best numbers day I had, up in the probably about 35, 40 fish in a mix between browns and brookies. Fishing was hard this year. I'm not going to lie. It was not the typical spring driftless trip, but it was definitely pretty fun. As far as 2024, I assume they're going to have it again. I think it's going to be the 10-year anniversary of the camp out, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm looking forward to, getting out there again, given, my schedule, permits or whatever. How about you? Is it going to be a annual thing, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to get out there. I think the first year I went out was 2014, unrelated to the Midwest Tenkara. I had already made plans before I knew about the Midwest Tenkara Fest. I was out the week before that, I think. So I've gotten back almost every year since. I mean, with some exceptions, we had a couple years I couldn't go because of family medical things. But yeah, I try to go every year. Yeah,
cool.
I'll definitely go.
Yeah, well, if we do, when we do hear about the dates or hear some more concrete things about it, if what Anthony and I just talked about for the last 15 minutes piques anybody's interest, we'll obviously post it on tenkaraangler.com in our event section, and try our best to kind of promote that event. Like I said, it's probably one of the best ones in terms of just getting a large turnout, meeting a lot of different people. And since it is sort of centralized in the country, you can get people from both the West and the East Coast. It's not, it's not necessarily coastal either.
Yeah, and I live in Pittsburgh, so I usually drive, and I used to always do it in one day. Now I'm breaking it up, but so it's like a 13, 14 hour drive for me, depending on how I go. So it's drivable. Yeah, like you say, it's so centrally located. You can Yeah, and while like the towns that we're talking about are really small, there are some major airports if you want to fly as opposed to drive that you can get into. For example, I flew into Minneapolis, Minnesota, which might sound like we're talking about, it's not that far away. It's maybe like once you get a rental car or whatever, it's maybe a 2-hour and 15-minute drive down to, where we're talking about. That's I think the closest major airport, but you could also fly into Madison, or into some smaller airports even closer, but you'd have to connect through, Chicago or maybe Minneapolis or something like that. So yeah, it's pretty cool event. I'm looking forward to it again next year. Absolutely.
Cool. So since then, I know I've been doing a little bit of fishing. You've been doing a little bit of fishing. What's your fishing summer looked like?
So anyone who knows me personally on, in real life, or on the social medias, probably knows I've got a situation now where I'm close to some trout fishing. We have a little place in central Pennsylvania now where I have access to 2 trout streams. Like I could walk to them. I haven't really been walking to them, but I could. Actually, once I get my wet wading system set up so that I don't have to be walking down the road in my clunky wading boots and waders, then I could walk to them in 5 minutes. But yeah, so I'm very excited to be able to see these streams as they kind of change over time. I haven't been fishing a lot. We're kind of getting settled into our place and doing a lot of stuff. But I've been walking the dog a lot along the streams and watching the fish.
Nice.
And they're kind of, some of them I feel like I can't fish for them now because I see the same fish. I know where they are. I'll be like, well, there's gonna be one right here by this wall. There's one up by that rock. So those fish now I feel like are like my pets. So I can't fish for those guys. But yeah, so it's kind of cool. It's like, it's been hot, so I've fished a couple times in the morning, and it's actually today. I fished today, and I thought I would have an amazing day because it had rained last night. There's a stream gauge right near where I'm fishing, so I can watch it pretty closely. So I know overnight the flow the day before was 30 CFS. Overnight it went up to 260, and dropped back and dropped back down to 50 by the time I went out. And at 50. It's kind of cool to get a feel for this. Now I know if the gauge says 50, it's fishable. It looks nice. There's a little bit of color, but it looked beautiful. I thought I should be catching a ton of fish. I was nymphing because it's a limestone stream, and and there's no noticeable bug activity or anything. So I thought, I'd put on a muskrat nymph, like a waltz worm kind of thing, and nothing. I'm not catching anything. And I put on a smaller, like a little zebra midge, and nothing. And I'm going through beautiful water. I mean, I know there's fish there, and I should be catching fish. So I finally, just about to finish, and I had to go back downstream a little bit. So I put on a wet fly, a caddis pupa wet fly, and I figured I'd fish that downstream a little bit as I was going, and I started catching fish. So it was kind of like relearning that lesson over the last few years. I've nymphed a lot and not done more, Tenkara style fishing. But today that's what worked for the fish. Once I did that, I kind of quit in about 10 minutes, but I think I caught 5 fish in about 10 minutes on one of the nicest one I've got so far in the stretch, all on like a wet fly cast into the riffles and then given a little bit of motion or let it drift below me. And so it was cool to see, like, to kind of reconnect with that Tenkara, more Tenkara like fishing and see the active fishing with some action, outproduce the nymphs. So that was kind of cool. And I'm excited, tomorrow to go out and try it again and see, like, if did I figure something out, or was it just how it happens sometimes, right? You think you figure it out, and the next day it doesn't work at all. But so that was kind of cool. It was cool to reconnect like that.
So you wrote a post, I guess it was last week, I guess depending on when people are actually listening to it, it might be obviously not last week, but you wrote a post last week about journaling. So are you writing these things down that you've been doing?
Yeah. So I've so far been faithful to I haven't taken it out with me because that's still difficult for me to stop while I'm fishing and do it. And write stuff down. So I'm not recording every single fish. And like there were some response. If you go to look at that post, there are some responses that are amazing. Some people go to there are numerous people mentioned that they use spreadsheets, and things like that. So I'm not doing it to that level. I mean, I'd like to think that I'm the kind of person that would do that. I mean, I'm an engineer, and I kind of sometimes I miss doing spreadsheets, but I know if I make it too complicated, I just won't do it. So I've just been more qualitative, writing down. But I am writing like the temperatures, since I have a gauge nearby, stream flows, and what worked and what didn't work. And kind of one of the impetus for doing this is, as I was packing for the Driftless, I came across a notebook that had one of my Driftless trips. I actually wrote every day. So that's Roscoe. So the neighbor is outside, so Roscoe has to let him know. But so I found this journal, and it was really cool to go back. Because the one thing about the Driftless is all the streams kind of start to, you think you'll remember it, but they all kind of look the same. So at the end of the day, it's kind of difficult to remember, well, where did I do this? Where was that one pool that was that, So it was actually cool to go back and see that, So that was kind of one of the things. So I'm hoping that as time goes by, I'll be able to see like the seasonality and how things are, how it's changing with time, or even with like the rain flows like that. So 2 days ago, the flow got up to what was it? It was like 8 times, it went up. There was this huge rain. So it got over almost 9 times the flow. And then the next day it came back down, which was today. That was 2 days ago. So it's just curious too, to see like how that, I've never been fortunate enough to be able to like fish the same piece of water and watch things happen like that.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to learn something, you know.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And the journaling will hopefully the journaling will like, I won't forget it as quickly.
Right. Yeah, I'm excited for you. It's got to be awesome to actually, you know, have a place that's so close to trout water. You know, I live 6 hours away, so like that's pretty amazing.
Right. It's and I, you know, and I don't know, I think I told you this. I ran into a sort of a miner. Anyone from Pennsylvania probably knows the guy. I ran into a miner. I don't say miner in Pennsylvania, kind of a fly fish, not a fly fisherman, but a known trout fisherman, Frank Nail. So the one day, so if anyone knows him, he's a spin fisherman. And he's just known for the numbers of fish that he catches, and keeps track of every fish. He reports it at the end of the year. I think he reported the first half of the year already with his numbers, and they're insane numbers of fish he catches. But it was kind of cool for me though, because he had just gone through the section of stream that I have immediate access to.
Right.
The exact section that I'll be fishing a lot, and told me how many fish he caught. And so it was good to have some context. So if it's that kind of thing, if you know the fish are there, right, you fish harder. So I go through and I catch one fish and he goes through and catches 50. Then I know, well, I get up my game, you know. So for me, it was kind of cool. It wasn't, you know, discouraging at all. It was like, okay, cool. Now I know, you know, I just got to work harder.
Well, I'll be looking forward to your year-end recap and your fish caught per minute and all those sorts of things for the end of 2023. For those that aren't familiar with Frank, you really should like Google Frank Nail trout recap or something like that. I have never seen somebody document numbers quite to the extent that he does. It's amazing. Like it's incredible. And
he was super nice. He gave me some info on another access point and everything. So he was friendly, super nice guy.
Cool. Very awesome. Very awesome. Well, that's awesome. I've done a little bit of fishing myself. You know, since I think I squeezed all my fishing into June so far this summer. Mentioned the Driftless the first week. Kind of like the last 2 weeks of June. One weekend I went up to North Georgia, one of my favorite places up there. And then the weekend after that, I guess it was Father's Day weekend, I went up to North Carolina, and they were two very different trips.
Really?
Yeah, the Georgia trip, you know, they're not that far apart. Like if you were actually looking at them on a map, it's maybe like an hour and a half drive from one place to the other place. So it's not that far at all. It's all like the Southern Blue Ridge. I mean, I should probably say an hour and a half, maybe as the crow flies. You know how it is driving through the mountains. It takes a little bit longer to get places. But North Georgia, I fish in a wildlife management area. It's catch and release only, but it's wild fish, not necessarily native, but wild. So there's rainbows and browns and brookies if you go super high. And that day was like picture perfect, like what you would think of like the Japanese Tenkara guys doing. Like that's what it was like. It was sunny. The fish were active. I was fishing kabari. That was actually the day that I fished the Talon Mini. So it does handle level line and unweighted flies perfect. And they were just super eager. They weren't big, you know, I think the biggest one I caught was maybe 10 or 12 inches long, but you know, it was just a ton of fish, which was phenomenal. It was just one of those things that after coming back from the Driftless, it gave me faith in my own fishing again. Like I can fish. I do remember how to fish. So that was the one trip. And then the next weekend I drove back to Florida, worked during the week, and then drove up to Maggie Valley, North Carolina, because they were having their first annual fly fishing festival. Cool. And if anybody's familiar with Maggie Valley, it's just this little kind of, foot of the mountain, kind of cool little town, a little touristy, but it's fun nonetheless. And, they were having this fly fishing festival. So I thought, hey, I'll pop in there, kind of walk around that. They had live music and all that stuff, and then go fish, during the day. And do the festival kind of in the evening. I think the festival went to about 7:00 at night, and it was a really, really fun time. There was a really good turnout at the festival. I was pretty surprised considering it was like the first year they were doing it. They not only had local vendors, and they had all kinds of obviously like fair food and stuff like that, but they had like the local fly shop was kind of running it. And then I guess what they probably had is I wouldn't say they were necessarily like the brands themselves, but it was probably like the local reps from the brands. Various fly fishing brands had booths.
Oh, that's cool.
And then, kind of some mom and pop people that are in, tying flies and things like that. It was really, really fun. There was no Tenkara presence there other than myself wandering around. So maybe I can convince Jason Sparks that we need to get a table there next year or something like that. But it was a really, really fun little event. And then from there, I just fished, Smoky Mountains National Park, Great Smoky Mountains. And unfortunately, it had rained that entire week. So we were talking about no rain. I got hit with the rain, and that morning, like even the National Park Service like put something on the Great Smoky Mountains page, like water is unusually high. Be careful around the water, all that stuff. But I'm like, I'm here, I'm going to go fishing, and that day I used the Kaida again, but I fished nymphs because the water was high and generally fast. I was just looking for any sort of little pockets I could, and probably got into maybe about a dozen or so rainbows, but nothing particularly not as frequent as the week before in Georgia. So it was kind of like a tale of two trips. Both were great. Both were not in Florida. They were both cool. A lot 75 to 80 degrees as opposed to the 95 or whatever that I have that right here. But they were both great experiences. And now the question is, like, when can I get head up there or somewhere else next? It's not super easy for me to do that. And at least in Florida, school's going to be starting before you know it. It's like my daughter's be going to school and all that stuff. So the summer's almost over. I hate to say it. It's crazy how quick it goes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking forward. I love the fall anyway, but that break in the temperature, because you don't want to stress the trout. That's why I've been trying to just fish in the mornings and when it's the coolest and stuff. So it'll be nice to get out. And I used to fish up. I don't stress out about fishing as much as I used to. I used to go all the time, just I had to. Now it's kind of nice, like, I can take the break and I don't feel like I have to fish all summer and all winter.
I hear you. Yeah. I when I used to live in Pennsylvania, I used to go out every weekend, just because it was close and it was easy. Now it's maybe once or twice a month if I can manage it. So
when you were in Philly, how close were you? I know you fish Valley Creek and stuff. Just how close were you to that? How cllose is that to home?
15 minutes. Like
really? Okay.
It was really close. So I lived off of it's an interstate or whatever. And it was basically just a quick shot down from where I live to Valley Forge National Park. And, that park, if anybody's ever fished there, it has its issues with, kind of urban encroachment from time to time. But it does have a wild brown trout population right in the middle of all that, kind of cool George Washington troops, that sort of history. And it's really pretty fishing. It's fairly open in most places, so it's easily accessible. Sometimes it's just hard to find a spot to park that's convenient because it is, in a national park, and people are parking in places to go see the national park type things. But they do have a trout unlimited there, so people do fish it. But I can't tell you, when I go there, it's never been super crowded or anything. But it was like 15 minutes from my house. So it was super, super convenient, super easy to get into, wild, not native, but wild, brown trout, which is really cool.
That's cool.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty much it. Oh, actually, I did want to ask you one other thing real quick. When I did go up to North Carolina, I mentioned that the water was high, it was fast, stuff like that. I'm curious, what do you do? Do you fish in conditions like that? Do you just not go out? Like, what would be I don't know if you have any advice for anybody that, wants to still go fishing, say they go on a trip or something like that, and they're faced with a condition like that. How would you attack that water?
Obviously you think about safety first. If the water looks, if it isn't safe looking, if you're on a small stream, I could tell you, I felt when I was fishing, I think it was in North Carolina, on a small stream with Rob Worthing and Eric. And there was this rhododendron bank that I didn't want to go up, and I thought I could sneak around this rock that went into the water. Yeah. And I stepped along this rock that kind of slid into the water, and I never touched the bottom. My foot just kept sliding.
Oh no, that's the worst feeling.
Yeah, right. So the stream was maybe 10 feet wide, and I never hit the bottom of this hole. I went up to my chin, And so I guess the first part is even on a small stream, you can get in trouble. So first of all, yeah, be careful and be safe. But yeah, I'm actually really surprised. I've fished in some pretty high conditions, like water pretty high and stuff, and had a lot of luck. And the one thing, and it's not Tenkara fishing, but often when I have those conditions, I'll do dry dropper fishing. I'll put a dry fly on, and I'll drop a nymph off of it, and then hit those, the pockets. If you can find some pocket water or the edges, I'll hit the edges of the stream and fish in the slow water across that fast current. And try to hit all the slow pockets. And a dry fly with the dropper is just a good way to do that, because it keeps if you try to just cast your nymph in there or your kabari, it just gets pulled out so quickly. So with that dry dropper, you can float it in those soft spots a lot more. So I know it's not Tenkara, but it works.
That's okay. It works. Like I said, if you're going on that trip and you want to try to fish no matter what, you got to bend those rules.
So that's what I do. And then the Driftless the one year, then I started using what do you call it? The Past Lake wet fly. It has that white wing, So that's another thing I'll do when the water's up. I'll put on like a wet fly. But I like the Past Lake a lot because it has that. I feel like in those conditions, it's kind of fish can see it, So what about yourself? Do you avoid that water?
Yeah. So the one thing that I did this trip, and I don't usually do it on all my trips, is I did bring a wading staff. I just wanted that extra point of contact. I understand that I'm getting older. I'm not invincible anymore, right? So I have a nice. It's actually not one of those collapsible staffs. It's actually like a solid like kind of piece of wood or whatever. A wood stick from Tyrone. That it was great. It helped me just as, like I said, another point of contact, help with stability, help checking depth. Like you mentioned, you kind of poke that down in something that's a little bit uncertain, because a lot of times, right, like you can't, even if you're wearing polarized glasses, you can't see like the bottom, especially when it's overcast or something like that.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. The wading staff is like pretty crucial in those conditions for sure. And in general, like if it's best not to go out by yourself in those conditions either.
Yeah,
like, I'm sure we all do it. It's probably best to be with someone, when you're in those. At any time you're fishing, really. I know I always let my wife know if I'm going to be by myself. I drop a pin where I'm parking,
where you're going,
I tell her where I'm going. And if you don't hear from me by 9 o'clock or whatever, that's where you send a search party. But
hopefully she's never had to send any.
No. But yeah, we're not getting any. I mean, I've got my ankles. I got a bum ankle now, so the wading's kind of tough. But yeah, wading staff for sure. That's a good point.
Yeah. So that's the one thing that I use as far as like gear goes. And then, as far as fishing goes, I was actually fishing nymphs that day. I wasn't, fishing a hopper dropper or dry dropper or anything like that. But I was just basically looking for, kind of the softer spots of water. I mean, sometimes the water's tearing through those in certain directions. It's not, super big sections, but just the way the rocks are arranged or whatever, it's coming through. So I was just looking for soft water, and that seemed to be where I picked out the majority of my fish. So that's kind of what I would suggest to people. But obviously safety first. If you're not confident going into that water, don't. It's better to go out another day, no matter how far you traveled.
I remember one time it was a huge runoff in Colorado, and we went to fish the Roaring River, and I think that's what it was, the one that the frying pan meets up with, and the guy at the fly shop. Of course, they're going to tell you to go out just because they want to sell you some flies.
Sure.
Just fish the edges. He gave us the big stonefly nymphs, and we go and we start fishing, and you could hear like rocks coming down the river.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like you'd hear, you could hear that sort of real bassy sound of these big rocks getting blown down the river. And so we're like, no, we're not going to wait in that.
Let's go get lunch.
Out that folder. Yeah.
Right. Well, hopefully we both can get out, soon again. And I know you've got, obviously your place now, and, I'd like to get out again. And, hopefully I know we're going to try to meet up in the fall or something like that. Yeah. So.
I did want to, before we sign off, I kind of forgot when we were talking about the Driftless.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thing that, there's this product. No, we're not.
Buggins.
So like, if not just in Wisconsin, obviously, but if you're anywhere, if you've ever been out and you're getting attacked by those gnats, they may not even be biting gnats, but they're getting in your ears and in your eyes, and they go up your nose. And like DEET doesn't do anything for them. This stuff, the Buggins, they have different formulas. This one is for gnats and no-see-ums, and it's like an herbal thing, and it's got, peppermint, lemongrass, clove, and some other things. I think kind of smells like bubblegum. But anyway, it won't damage your gear either like DEET does, but this stuff actually really works on those gnats. And it's all natural, I think. So anyway, if you're going out to the Driftless or anywhere where it's buggy with other bugs, and not just mosquitoes, give this stuff a try. It's really good. And like I said, not sponsored by Buggins, but you'll be glad you have it. The other thing I wanted to talk about, we were talking about nymphing a lot, and I got this the other day from Dragon Tail. It's this 1.5 gal line. So it's originally, I think, for bass fishing. So it's not sold initially as a Tenkara line, but it's a fluorocarbon, high vis orange, and it's hard to find like line that small, so it's 1.5.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I love it. I'm like, it's like my new favorite line if I know I'm going to be going out and I'm doing fixed line nymphing.
Yep.
Like this stuff is great because it's pretty limp. It's soft. It seems like pretty supple, more supple than a Tenkara line generally is. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's not great if you're going to be casting anything wind resistant. But like if you like nymphing with your Tenkara rod and you're looking for like a really light line, but something that's still high vis, like I really like this. The only thing it is a little, it's a little, I don't know what the word is, but because it's the diameter smaller, I usually wind my line on the grip of my rod.
On the grip.
Yeah.
You're one of those evens.
Yeah, I'm one of those people. So with like a number 3 or number 4 line, it's substantial enough that you usually don't end up with this rat's nest.
Okay.
Like with this stuff though, it's kind of almost like tippet in itself in a way. You know what I mean? So I tried doing that with this and it came off and it was just this ball. So I would recommend putting on a spool. But anyway, I never used it before, and I think they might have it in 2 as well. I'm not sure, but anyway, I loved it.
Cool.
So
what's it called again for everybody?
Well, I got it's Ultra Sight, and I got it on Dragon Tail, Dragon Tail Tenkara. So if you go to their line thing, you'll see it there. I'm not sure what they're calling it on the website. Well, we could put a link in the
yeah, we'll find it. We'll put a link in the show notes.
But it was pretty good. So, and then this is the other thing I wanted to just touch base on. I made a post about a while back about trying the unsuspecting minimalist, I might have called it. And I got this pack a while ago from Tenkara Rod Company. And when I first got it, like I was just too small. I'm never going to use it. But it's actually like become like my go-to pack now. So it is small, but it's got this thing on the bottom where you can put your your spools of line or tippet. And some points on the side where you can put stuff. And I use these small fly boxes, that you can get on Amazon.
Oh, the thin ones, yeah.
Yeah, the real thin one. And so I could fit like 3 of them in there. But anyway, so I'm still using that. So I just thought to follow up on that. I'm still really enjoying that actually. And kind of surprisingly, because I thought it was going to be too small. But I'm kind of really enjoying it. And it's forcing me to like I thought it's just forcing me to like be a little more considerate about what I'm taking. I can't take a bunch of junk, Sometimes you don't have what you need, but you make do. Like today, I probably would, if I had more stuff with me, I may have never ended up using that caddis wet fly because I would have probably had what I thought I needed,
Right.
I was forced to try something different. So
yeah, it's always interesting trying to find that medium of, I know a lot of people come to Tenkara for minimalism. Yeah. But, there's that difference between having not enough and, maybe having those options, like you just mentioned, having that extra fly box, the extra fly or whatever. I know everybody kind of does it for their own reasons, but that's always just an interesting, balance for some. And I say that as I just posted something on my Instagram, a picture of my rod rack. I have 23 different Tenkara rods. So minimalism is not in my recipe, I guess. That's
the dirty secret of Tenkara, I think, right? Because I fly fished for many, many years, 25 years. And I think I had, at any one time, maybe I had 3 fly rods, like a 3-weight, like a 5-weight, and a 6-weight or something like that,
Yeah.
And I was happy. you know, and I had a reel that fit with each one, and that was what I used, you know. But yeah, then I take up Tenkara, which is supposed to be, you know, simple, and I end up
Rod,
with
line, fly, right?
50 rods. So, yeah,
They're just so easy to collect.
they are. They're so small. Collect them all.
Well, awesome. Well, let's close this up. I do have a couple, I guess, Tenkara angler related commercials, I guess, in closing. The first one is we talked a lot about community events in this episode. We did kind of touch on briefly the 2023 Tenkara Camp, which is the event that we hold as Tenkara Angler. As I mentioned earlier in the podcast, we held it in Tennessee. We'd love to start planning the one for 2024, but would love to get some feedback or ideas from our readership on where we should hold it. The last couple ones that we've held have been in the Southeast, primarily because Jason Sparks has been the one that's kind of taken the lead up on setting them up. And he, you know, lives in North Carolina. So the first one was in, you know, North Carolina side of the Smokies. And this past year, as I said, was in the Tennessee side of the Smokies. But there's no reason really that they need to necessarily be there. You know, if somebody has a great place where there's a lot of different water that people can fish, that everybody's not all on the same water. And then there's obviously accommodations and things like that, whether it's a campground or, you know, a group camp or, you know, something like that where people can congregate kind of all in the same place. We'd love to get your thoughts on what might be a good location for the 2024 Tenkara Camp. And if you have, you know, say it's not somebody that lives in our necessary location where we're at, you know, like I said, Jason's in the Southeast, I'm in the Southeast, Matt's in, you know, the upper Midwest, and Anthony's in Western Pennsylvania. Somebody wants to kind of help us potentially scout those places out and be an organizer. We'd love to hear it. I mean, I'd love to consider doing this. I mean, I don't know about you, Anthony. I think doing one out west would be cool.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
You know, I know they do. Red Brook has the one in New England, but we haven't gone up there yet. There's lots of different places where this could potentially be held. You know, we just would love some suggestions and maybe a little bit of help in kind of figuring it out. So, where would you like to actually have? If you had like a dream Tenkara camp, where would it be?
Me?
Yeah,
I haven't been out west for a while.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so I love Colorado. I think Colorado would be cool.
It's tough to go wrong with Colorado. I
Yeah.
would say.
I mean,
that.
great. Rocky Mountain National Park is cool, you know.
Mhm.
You've got like lots of lodging around there, you know, that's not outrageously expensive too, you know.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. I actually, the Tenkara, back when there used to be Tenkara USA
Yeah.
summits, I really liked the one that was in the Shenandoah National Park area.
oh yeah, that's cool.
You know, still kind of leans towards the Southeast a little bit, but
Yeah.
I really like that one. I'd like to go back there, if not even as part of a Tenkara camp, but, you know, it's just, you know, a reason to get back up there and fish a little bit. I like that area a lot.
Yeah, that was really cool. That was a nice place.
Cool. A couple other just housekeeping. We would love it. You know, obviously Tenkara Angler is a forum where we'd love to tell your stories about fixed line fly fishing or Tenkara. And I know a lot of people have been out fishing this summer. So if you have any stories that you'd like to tell, you know, please go to our website. We love it. You know, if you'd submit pictures, stories, whatever, we'd post them to the website. You know, I think a lot of people tend to post stuff on Instagram or Facebook or whatever these days, but they're usually just pictures with a little bit of, you know, text. If there's something that you feel is worthy of a little bit longer form, you know, we'd love to host that on Tenkara Angler. So, you know, we encourage, you know, anybody to just, you know, use the button on our website to, you know, submit their stories or just contact us through the email, and we can kind of help you craft a story. We've gotten a couple interesting ones in already this summer that we've kind of been parsing out, but I'd love to keep that flow, you know, going.
Yeah, I'd love to. This is a personal plea from me. Is I would love. I remember when I started Tenkara, that people would talk about Tenkara technique. You'd hear that word a lot, but not see a lot of specifics about what people meant. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for people trying to get into Tenkara that might get to Tenkara Angler, I would love for those of you out there who do practice more traditional Tenkara and stick with like a more, you know, active presentation and that kind of thing. I would love to hear from people like that, you know, like, and I think there's probably a lot of people that would love to see more of that. Like when people say Tenkara, what do they mean? You know,
Right.
what are the specific techniques, you know? I mean, I could go down and make a list or whatever, but I'd love to hear from other people and hear like what flies they're using and how they're using these specific Tenkara. So if anyone, you know, if that's something that you do a lot, please send an article in.
Yeah, and we'd love to hear from people out west too. You know,
Yeah.
we get a lot of coverage, just like I said, based on where we live. It's a lot of the East Coast, a lot of the Midwest, but we don't hear a lot from folks out, you know, out in the, you know, the mountain states, or even, you know, out in California, Oregon, Washington, places like that. So anybody, you know, doing anything out there, we'd love to kind of broaden the distribution, you know, of you know, stories just in general.
Yeah,
They don't have to be how-tos, they don't have to be gear reviews, it could just be stories, trip reports, whatever. Let's expose, you know, our larger community to you know, what Tenkara opportunities are out there, you know, across the country. So we'd love to see that. And then I will put just a little bug in right now. We are going to do our annual print magazine again this winter. So if you have a really, really good story, you might want to hold on it. We'll probably put a call to action for that, you know, in the fall, maybe September or October. We'll put, you know, the how to submit your stories for the print magazine. But we are going to do that again, and that was really well received this year. I love putting that together every year. It's hard work, so I don't like doing it that frequently. That's why it's a once a year thing. But it's really fun, and I know people like to see the actual tangible, you know, having stories, printed paper in hand, and, you know, that sort of thing. So we'll definitely do that again.
Cool.
Well, I think that's pretty much it. You know, we will kind of, I guess we'll wrap it up now. I'd recommend, you know, if you want to, you know, before our next podcast comes out, if you want to keep up with what's going on in Tenkara Angler, obviously check out our website. We'd love it if you'd subscribe to this podcast, check out our YouTube channel. We've been putting up some fresh content there. Subscribe to that for updates, or, you know, honestly, any of our socials. You know, Jason Sparks in particular is active on our Instagram account. He's always putting something up there, you know, pretty much every day. So if you're not following us on, you know, those various places, we'd love it, you know, if you do that. It just kind of helps us, you know, keep engaged with the readership and our listeners. So I guess until then, I guess Anthony and I will kind of sign off right now, and you know, we'll talk to you all again soon.
All right. Thanks for listening, folks.